Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Reaching New Heights. Today, we are joined by a very influential man. He is not only the former CEO of Chipotle, he is also the author of Love is Free, Guac is Extra. He is a fellow Washington Speakers Bureau exclusive speaker. We both are represented by them. He is a businessman. He once was a lawyer. He is so smart and so sophisticated, and he is truly just an icon and a trailblazer in the entrepreneurial business world. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Monty Moran.
Thank you very much, Megan. That was a very nice introduction.
Of course, Monty, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
I am so excited and so grateful. And thank you also for sending me a copy of your book. It's amazing.
Yeah, you're welcome. Awesome. I'm glad you like it.
I found so many nuggets of wisdom in here. And I think for a young entrepreneur like myself, this book is just the new it guide, and it shares so many truths about not only the glamorous side of, running a business and being well known and a public figure, but really what it takes to develop loving, healthy relationships with coworkers and what it means to be present in the moment and to communicate. And so I'm really excited for today's conversation.
Great. Yeah. Look forward to it.
Yes. So Monty, I want to know, tell me a little bit about your upbringing and how your childhood shaped who you are into today.
Wow. Big question. Okay. So I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. I had really interesting parents. Okay. So my dad was a cell biologist who was really, really smart. He went to Princeton, Harvard, and Brown, one for each degree. And you might have thought that would make him sort of snobby and elite, but he was just the opposite. He was actually a guy who grew up in New York City and wished he had been an American Indian. He wanted to live in a teepee and be out in the plains flying his falcons because he was a falconer. So I was always around all these birds of prey, going out in the fields and flying falcons after rabbits and other game. So that was interesting. I didn't really like that much because I've always wanted the rabbit or whoever the victim was to get away. So I was kind of on the other side. I wanted my dad's falcon to lose and the animal to win. I was rooting for the underdog. But anyways, I don't think he liked that very much. But anyway, he was an awesome guy, really smart. My mom was and is. My dad passed away 3 years ago, but my mom, super smart, psychotherapist, and my mom and dad were both really into sort of learning about spirituality, I was born in the 60s and I was growing up in the 70s in Boulder. And that's the time where everyone was sort of getting, especially in Boulder, Colorado, was getting into spirituality and, transactional analysis and Zen and Buddhism and Christianity and, sort of looking at everything and to try to uncrack what the answer to life was. So my parents were really into that, but also were extremely athletic. They're always outside. So I grew up basically outside all the time. I was either on cross-country skis or hiking or, downhill skiing or playing sports all the time. So really active family, but really involved in sort of, they were very, very active. They didn't watch any TV hardly at all. My dad thought it was sort of an evil device that would ruin your brain. So not really, but he just thought it was a waste of time. And so not a lot of TV. And so all the time that most people spent playing or watching TV, I spent, peppering my dad with questions and trying to learn from him. So it was an awesome upbringing in Boulder, really, really fun.
Wow, that sounds so unique. And honestly, I've been to Boulder a few times and I so agree. I think it's such a forward-thinking place. And it reminds me, having grown up in San Francisco Bay Area, it reminds me a lot of Berkeley meets, a little bit of Venice Beach, just very cool thinking.
Yeah, totally. It's so much like that. It's a lot like that. Yeah. Venice Beach maybe is even more interesting from the people watching standpoint, but they all had that sort of very open, investigative, wanting to learn, curious about the universe sort of thing. And also another thing was my mom was a really, really great cook. And my parents used to have dinner parties all the time and had people over, all the time. And these dinners were sacred at my house. It was like there were candles, there was wine. I'm talking every single night, candles and wine. Yeah. Not always someone invited over, always our family.
Yeah.
Always at the table, always with candles, always with wine. I started drinking wine when I was 10. I'm not talking about gulping it down, but just a little bit. My dad wanted me to understand wine. And so the dinners were a really serious time to get together and, listen to each other and spend time. But a lot of times they would invite these incredible people who are my dad's friends and my mom's friends, but mostly scientists and stuff that worked with my dad in the medical school and so forth, or people who were scientists from around the world who would come to meet with him. And some really prominent folks. And so I sat there at those dinners, but didn't just listen. I was expected to participate. And so I would ask questions of these people. And it wasn't that it was okay that I asked questions, it was expected. And so I guess I got sort of confident that I was allowed to be curious and confident that I was allowed to ask questions. And if there's one thing that I think I'm most grateful to my parents for, it's that they allowed my curiosity to stay alive. I think a lot of kids, when they're really, really curious, it drives their parents crazy. I know it drove me crazy. All three of my kids are curious, but one of them was so curious, the one who kind of looks like me and acts like me. He was so curious that it drove me crazy. So I had to really focus on, wait a minute. He was so curious and so smart and so always wanting more and more from me that it was kind of exhausting. Come home from a day at work and just get peppered with questions for like 4 hours until he fell asleep. And so, but my parents were really great at encouraging that curiosity and letting me know that that was valuable and that I was a valuable person that deserved to ask those questions. So I got good at asking questions. And also my dad, I think, was really annoyed by me. And I put that in the book. My dad was annoyed with all the questions I asked. And I could tell that his neck would stiffen up when I'd ask questions in the wrong way. So I think I got really good at asking questions in a way that kind of showed reverence for him and showed that I, respected him greatly and that he was like a guru to me. And if I said the questions in just the right way, his neck would sort of soften, he'd relax and he'd be like, well, Moose, because he called me Moose. Well, Moose, and he'd start these answers, which were always filled with tons of wisdom because he was a super, super smart guy. So I was really lucky. I think I had great parents.
Wow, that's incredible. And I relate to so much of what you said. I grew up in a similar environment. My parents, very open-minded, very spiritual, just, whatever makes you happy. My parents actually, funny enough, when I was 10 years old, they showed me the movie The Secret, and all about manifestation and law of attraction and ask, believe, receive. And I'll never forget being that young. And although my brain could not fully understand really what it was about, I just will never forget them showing me that movie. And as I got older, I really sat and thought about what it means to not only work hard and hustle and, network, but to also just be in that mindset of positive thinking and, just being kind to other people and having a good reputation. And I think, of course, you would know so much about this, but I think a huge part of getting to where you want to be and being in the business world is not only, hustling and all those things, but it's also being the type of person that you would want to work with and being, professional and really just that quality person.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And this, what you're saying kind of strikes at the heart of vulnerability because it's as I said in the book, our most natural state as human beings is to grow, blossom, develop, and sort of grow towards understanding truth better, understanding ourselves better, understanding other people better. And if that's not happening, there's some dysfunction present, and I really believe that. So vulnerability is really important. And my family, I guess, I felt there was a lot of room for my vulnerability. As a kid, I would cry, I would be upset. And my mom would always encourage that. Actually, she would encourage the crying, like, oh, this is good. This is like, you're feeling your feelings, good for you, that kind of thing. So I was never really told that if I cried or had feelings that some might call wimpy, I was never told that those were wimpy. I was always told those are good. It's good that you can feel your pain. It's good that you can feel your sadness, and so that was a message I got at a very early age that I think most boys aren't given that message at an early age. A lot of them are told to toughen up, shape up, stop crying. I know it hurts all of us to see a young person cry. So sometimes you might have the temptation to say, oh, no, don't cry. No, it's okay. But I was sort of given the opposite thing. Was like, it's like, wow, okay, you're crying. Wow, you must be feeling some very strong feelings. Good for you. That kind of thing, And so I think since my vulnerability was respected and cultivated, I think I got used to accepting a wider range of feelings and emotions than most people accept. Yeah. And I think that's a really important part of myself as an adult, is that I don't prefer, this is going to sound crazy, but I almost don't prefer being what most people would call happy to being what most people would call sad. Like, I don't think sad is a worse state of affairs. I think sad is totally appropriate when it's appropriate, right? I don't think it's appropriate to be happy when you're witnessing something very, very sad, right? It would be weird. It would show dysfunction to me. To be like, hey, you go by a car accident and someone's died, and you're like, hey, I mean, right? It should affect you. You should feel sadness and remorseful, and there's some things that when you feel angry, sometimes you should feel angry. It's not bad to feel angry. That makes sense. So there's this whole wide range of emotions, most of which are rejected by society, which are just as important as the ones that are sort of rewarded by society.
Wow. Yeah, I agree. And I think so much of who we become has to do with our childhood, and how, number one, this is something I've learned in therapy, but how, we receive attention as a child. So whether you were rewarded for when you got A pluses on a test, or you were like, how you were given attention, it really shapes you into not a love language, but really, your communication style. And I think, for the overachiever like myself, I'm a total type A perfectionist overachiever. I will admit that, but it also serves me because it really just has this inner drive where, to me, I've never really arrived in life. I'm always constantly want to do more, because as a kid, the way that I received attention was when I succeeded. My parents validated me. And I think what you touched on is important, because when we do have children, like you said, they can be crying. And I think when we acknowledge that and say, are you okay? It can almost make it worse. And there's just so many ways. Yeah.
Yeah. And that reminds me, I mean, as a kid, one thing I hated as a kid, and I still really hate using the word hate here, right? But one thing I really hate is I hated to be misunderstood, couldn't stand it. And I also didn't like to misunderstand, so I was really into understanding people and being understood by people. And so because of that, I wanted to develop the ability to communicate really, really, really well. And it's not that I wanted to develop that ability, it's that I needed to develop that ability to not be upset by being misunderstood. And so I worked really hard on developing an ability to be understood. And as part of that, I developed this with this kind of, I guess, philosophy. And I wrote a paper about it that I gave my mom when I was 10 years old, which she showed me recently. And it was called my Philosophy of Non-Labelism. I believed that language was inherently limited, and I still do, because words would limit our ability to think, because we would think in terms of words. And so when people used certain words, I thought those words were very, very unhelpful. And some of those are words that are used all the time. And I'll give you the two biggest examples maybe are the words good and bad. I don't believe in good and bad. I don't think those are useful concepts. I really don't. I don't think it's useful to say someone's a bad person or a good person. I don't think it's useful to say today was a bad day or today is a good day. Those are not helpful labels. In fact, they're extremely unhelpful, because what they tend to do is they tend to take something that's very nuanced and complicated and dramatically oversimplify it, which basically ruins one's ability to see the depth and nuance of a situation. And also right and wrong. Really, really unhelpful, ineffective, limiting words that throw you off the track of actually engaging in the act of discovery, So as a human being, if there's anything that is wonderful about this life, it's that we get to discover things. We get to use our senses to learn more, understand more, and get closer to the truth, which, as you've read in my book, I think the truth is really big deal. In fact, I think the truth is God. I think the truth is love. So those three concepts to me are the same thing. So to me, my search is for truth, and that's truth within myself. It's truth, the truth I see in you right now. It's the truth that I see in the world around me. And when I see things that are inauthentic or not genuine, I'm not attracted to those things. I don't like them. I find they are a representation of dysfunction. Something's wrong if something's not real, So I've always had that really sort of almost like turbocharged, almost violent curiosity to find out what's really going on. So, if you fast forward to my time at Chipotle, when I would sit down with an employee at Chipotle one-on-one at a table and say, hey, how are you doing? And if they said, oh, pretty good, right away I knew they weren't pretty good. Because when you say pretty good, that means you're not good. So that's why I talk about in the book of it's really helpful if you don't listen to what people say very much at all, and instead really focus on what they're communicating, whether they're trying to communicate it or not. That what they are communicating something may be exactly the opposite of what they're trying to communicate that they're actually communicating. How are you today? Oh, I'm pretty good. How are you? Well, it means you're totally not pretty good, right? It's like, oh, and then I'd say to people, well, what's wrong? After they said to me they're doing pretty good. Well, no, I'm fine. I said it was pretty good. I know, but you aren't pretty good. What's wrong? And then they'd be like, oh, and they would start talking to me about what was wrong. And then I'd find that way more enjoyable to talk about something that was real rather than continue with something that was
Right. And that's such a valid point you bring up. I think, especially in the workspace, just, whether we're in COVID in a virtual office versus in person, I think that genuine, authentic communication is so powerful, Monty, because like you said, I think if you ask people, how are you doing? They're just, I'm fine. I'm doing great. But I think if you can flip it around, and if you are the CEO, you are a coworker, you're an employee, it's just really putting in the effort into those relationships, because those matter. And I think going about it, maybe, as simple as, instead of how are you doing, flip it and say, how are you feeling? Because I think flipping those words allows just such an energetic difference where, oh, how am I feeling? Well, I'm feeling, it just allows for more in-depth conversation, and people could say I'm feeling happy, sad. They can label it, I think, a lot quicker.
Yeah, I think that's that's a really neat idea. And I think also the idea of feeling is, to me, how you feel is extremely important, because how you feel is how you feel. It just is what it is, right? And how you feel is showing you something about how you're reacting to your environment. And I think all of us have times in our lives where we meet someone who seems to be very, very, very nice and big smiles and polite, but we don't feel good. Maybe we don't feel trusting of that person. And likewise, we might meet someone who isn't smiling and who looks sort of grumpy, and yet we have a really nice feeling around them. So it's like our ability to feel is formed after tens of millions of years of evolution. So our ability to feel engages our subconscious mind, which is like violently stronger than our conscious mind. So the stuff that we're pre-wired with as infants, and that we bring into adulthood, our subconscious intelligence, is vastly wiser than our conscious intelligence. So everything we learn in our lives, in other words, we become a lawyer, we learn about the law, we learn about, geology, we learn about mathematics, whatever we learn in our lives, whatever we learn growing up, whatever our parents teach us, friends teach us, all of that put together is, less than 1/10% of what we already know, just inherently through our instinct, right? You take a cat and you hold it upside down and drop it, it lands on its feet. Everyone knows that, right? Well, it didn't learn that. It has that wired into its being. It's part of its instinct. Well, we humans have, like a cat, we have loads and loads and loads of instincts. And one of those instincts is that, we sort of bristle at certain things and we maybe don't know why. And we feel really warm in other situations and we might not know why. But I think it's very, very important to look at and acknowledge those feelings and explore, perhaps why those feelings are arising. And by exploring why those feelings are arising, we will get much closer to the truth.
Wow. That is so powerful. And I agree with what you're saying. I think it's just hitting home, but I'm having so many light bulb moments, because I think it is so important. And now more than ever, we all are craving communication and being authentic and having a sense of community. And I think we've all found that through Clubhouse, TikTok, Snapchat, just virtual online places of importance. But I really, I agree with everything you're saying. I would also love to know, Monty, so you talk so much about the importance of communication and being authentic in your book. I would love to know, in your opinion, what do you think how do you think people should go about asking the right questions? And what, in your opinion, is the correct way to have healthy conversations that are productive and proactive in the workspace?
Okay. So the first thing I would say would be a kind of a repeat of something I already said, which is when you sit down to talk to someone, well, first of all, you have to make sure that you're capable of being present in that moment. Okay. So what that means is your house is not on fire. You didn't just break up with your girlfriend. She isn't about to call you and chew you out. That you're capable of just being present with whoever you're with. Okay. Because so many times we sit down to have a conversation, quite frankly, we aren't able to have. Okay. We aren't able to be fully present for it because we're distracted, and it has to do with, take your phone and put it face down on the table, turn the ringer off, It has to do with, letting people know that, hey, I need some time to sit here. And it should be implied that this time is with this person. In this case, I'm sitting with you, Megan. I'm in a situation where I have tried to organize it in such a way that I will not be distracted during the conversation. And I'm here. So that's number one, is actually be there, be present, and not be completely distracted by too many other things. Now, all of us have other things on our minds. It's impossible perhaps to be devoid of all of those things, but it is possible for us to bring presence to a situation and actually be there. Here we are. That's number one. Number two, when you start talking to someone, you have to train yourself. And I've done this for my whole life, so it's become second nature for me. But most people are trained to listen predominantly to someone's words. I do not listen predominantly to someone's words. In fact, I try to avoid listening too much to their words, so much so that I'm really looking at their face. I'm looking at their eyes. I'm looking at the way they sit. I'm looking at their enthusiasm or lack thereof. I'm looking at whether they're smiling or frowning, or whether they're trying to smile when they're really internally frowning, or trying to frown when they're really internally smiling. I'm looking at, the discrepancies in their face. I'm looking at the discrepancies in the way their hands move versus the way their eyes are moving. So I'm looking at so many different things that communicate so much more loudly and, importantly, so much more accurately what's really going on in that person than their words, which are usually at least partially nonsense. Okay, because all of us are trained to be pleasant, even when we don't feel pleasant. So therefore, acting pleasant when you're not pleasant is something I'd say that's nonsense, because you're acting in a way you don't feel. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm not saying when you walk down the street and someone says, "Hey, how you doing, dude?" You go, "I'm shitty. It's a horrible day." I'm not saying that there aren't practicalities in going ahead and speaking in pleasantries at times. But when we sit down with someone in the workplace or at home or anywhere, and our goal is actually to be present and have a communication and learn something about them, after being present, we have to actually witness what's going on, not just listen to their words. So that's one of the biggest things that I think is most important, is stop listening to people's words and actually listen to what they're communicating. And when you do that, it sounds crafty and it sounds investigative. It is investigative. It sounds like you're really prying. You are, okay? But what you're really doing is you're really honoring that person. You're honoring that person because you want to actually know what's really going on. When you don't buy someone's bullshit, you're doing them a favor. So if I sit down with you and I say, how are you doing, Megan? And you say, "Yeah, I'm pretty good." And I don't say, "Whoa, what's going on?"
Right.
It doesn't sound like you are pretty good. Are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I say that, you're like, "Whoa, he actually wants to know, am I okay?" That's very affirming to the other person. They're like, "Wow, he actually gives a shit. He's not just, going through the motions. He wants to dig deeper." So when I try to dig deeper, you do it with genuine curiosity and a desire to understand someone, that is a very, very loving act. And it invites intimacy. It invites depth. It invites real understanding. And in real understanding, there is always love.
Wow.
So that's where I start I'll give you an example that I think brings this home, and it's kind of at the end of my book. I talk about this with Wendy and Jörg in Berlin, Germany. At the end of the book, I talk about where I went with my mom to her birthplace, and on the way home, she wanted to stop in Berlin and see a dear, dear friend of hers who she hadn't seen in many, many years, and who had advanced Parkinson's disease. So I walked into their apartment with Wendy and Jörg, and Jörg was maybe 84. Wendy was like 79. I'm guessing those ages. And I walked in, and Jörg was this sort of big, strong man. I said, "Oh, nice to meet you." And I gave him a hug, as is customary for me. I hug people. And then I walked over to Wendy, and Wendy was in a wheelchair, and she was trembling from very advanced stage Parkinson's disease. It was very clear. She was extremely uncomfortable in her body. It was clear that her body was in a state of, advanced disease. Mm-hmm. And so I went to hug her, and it was awkward because she was delicate. I perceived she was very fragile. She was very, very thin, and I didn't want to hurt her. And so I hugged her as best I could. And then I went and sat down, and then my mom was mostly talking, catching up. "How are you doing? How are things going?" And as I sat there, all of a sudden I realized that I was mentally not fully engaged in the moment because I was distracted by Wendy's condition, that being she had this condition of having severe Parkinson's disease. I didn't understand what it felt like. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how it felt. And I felt a distance between myself and her because of her advanced disease. And so all of a sudden I realized, God, I don't want to feel distant from her.
Mm,
She doesn't deserve for me to feel distant from her. Why am I distant from her? Well, it's because I don't understand. I don't understand what she's going through. How can I understand what she's going through? Well, I can ask. Okay. Now I will tell you, when I tell the story, like 98, 99% of the people I tell it to are like, oh my God, I would never have asked that. But, so I looked over and I said, Wendy, what's it like to have Parkinson's disease? I don't know anything about it. I mean, how long have you had this disease? And when I asked her that, she had been looking sort of to the side and she looked at me like that and looked at me really intensely. And I thought, oh shit, I've stepped in it, like I've offended her.
right.
And she looked at me for, maybe 5 seconds. She went, it hurts. And then she said, it hurts.
Wow.
So she said it hurts with this intensity that I thought, oh, crumbs, like, oh, crumbs, to the point where I didn't even know what to say. So I waited another 4 seconds. And then she said in this very soft, almost surrendering way, she said, it hurts. And I said, I'm sorry. And she said, and she, maybe had a little of a tear in her eye and I had a tear in my eye. And I said, wow, when did you find out you had it? And we talked about that. And is there anything you can do about it? I mean, are you on medication? What is the medication? Is there better medication? Is there anything you can do to improve it? What makes you more comfortable? How can I help? And in that genuine curiosity for her actual situation, all of a sudden, this incredible intimacy developed between she and I, where, I saw her. I saw who she was. I saw the beauty of her soul. I saw the clarity in her eyes. I saw her intelligence. And all of a sudden I had this connection with her. And she had a connection with me. Mm-hmm. And by having, I'll say sort of the courage to just ask her a question that most people would have thought perhaps rude or uncomfortable, right. It opened up this world of love between us that in a 1.5 hour visit with her, turned out to be very, very powerful, because I went back to the United States after that, said our goodbyes. And on the way out the door, when we were leaving, she said, I know what you need to do with the rest of your life. Because she had asked me, hey, you've retired from Chipotle, what are you going to do now? And I said something like, oh, shucks, I don't know. But at the end of this 1.5 hour meeting, I said, she said, I know what you need to do with the rest of your life. And I said, oh, you do? Okay, what? And she goes, ask questions. You need to ask questions.
Wow.
But she said it in a way where she was like, this is what you need to do with your life. And she meant it. And I knew what she meant. She meant, my gosh, by asking me what you asked me, you like cracked into my soul. I feel like I can express myself. I feel alive. We've had this intimate, lovely conversation. We've got this relationship all of a sudden that formed in 5 minutes, but was deep. Anyway, so I leave, go back to the United States, 1.5 weeks or 2 weeks later. My mom calls me and says, God, I just had the most incredible conversation with Wendy. And I said, oh, you did? How is she? And she says, well, she said that 1.5 hour visit was the most powerful spiritual practice she and Jörg had ever had in their lives. And they'd been going to formally to their spiritual workers who had done this spiritual work for 25 years together. And this just asking a question and wanting to know and being curious and not being satisfied with the words, but actually seeing past the words as to actually how she was feeling, created an intimacy that allowed this sort of development of this unfolding truth and unfolding love. And anyway, it's just a beautiful, beautiful time, which if I had stayed there all, yeah, okay, hi, and all uncomfortable, it would have been completely wasted and lost. Never would have happened.
Right. And that is really true. And just to piggyback off of what you said, I think something that I am learning right now as a young businesswoman is, number one, people cannot read your mind. So if you have a desire or you have a boundary you need to set, or something that is on your mind, obviously communicating it in a healthy way and being professional and, coming at it, using I statements where you're saying, I feel this way because and not attacking. But I think it's so powerful because we have to realize that in order to keep a healthy relationship, and like you said, you took that chance and asked her how she felt, and you never know what she was going to say. but I think it only opens up the door for conversation and just learning more about each other. And I think that is something that I am learning, is just people cannot read my mind, and I have to get comfortable with communicating how I'm feeling all of the time. And the more I do it, the more I get comfortable with it. But when I was younger, I was a huge people pleaser. And that to me used to be my biggest fear ever, was telling people how I felt. I used to get like paralyzed by it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's true. And I was always a huge people pleaser too. I always wanted to,
Oh my gosh.
make sure that everyone was comfortable around, make sure they're all happy, worried about
Yeah.
everyone else. And listen, that's a really nice quality to have. I think that in terms of reading one's mind, I think people can read your mind if you let them. Okay. So that means if you are present and you sort of allow the way you're feeling to be readable, if you have the courage to say, here's the way I feel, and just let it be, then you let people in and sort of become vulnerable, then they'll become a lot better at reading you, and then, but it tickles to have someone read your mind. It tickles to let them in, right? You can feel like, oh, a little nervous that they're going to, if you let them see deep inside, there's a tickle there, like maybe a little fear, a little anxiety, to let them see who you are. And I think it's a really nice practice to work to become very, very comfortable with that, because the truth about who we are does not need any defense. I think one thing you'll see that happens in communication incessantly, and also happens in our brains throughout our whole life, and happens in society, and happens in every country, and happens in the government of every country, is that we are all constantly defending ourselves. Okay. If ever we are defending ourselves, ever, we are trying to cover up the truth, because the truth doesn't need any defense. You don't, if I'm 6'4", for example. So if someone comes running up to me and goes, dude, you're short. Okay. It's probably not going to hurt my feelings very much, because I am not short.
Right.
I'll probably say, oh, I wonder why they're saying that. Okay. But there's a lot of other things that people say just in daily life that people tend to defend. They tend to be defending, and instead of just saying, here's exactly what's going on. The truth doesn't need defending. The truth is the strongest thing in the world. The truth cannot be made otherwise. It is not, you can't destroy it with rocks and bombs and flame. It's totally impenetrably strong. And yet we spend all this time defending ourselves. What are we defending? We're defending an illusion. We're defending something about ourselves that isn't real. We are defending our ego, And so if we are able to like try to notice when we're defending ourselves, and then give ourselves permission to stop defending, and a lot of times this happened with my kids growing up. To like, they might say something like, so accusatory, Dad, you're not spending enough time with me, And I'd be like, yes, I am. I've been spending enough time. I've got 3 kids. I'm trying to give the time to you equally. But what am I defending?
Right.
What is true when your son says, Dad, you're not spending enough time with me? I mean, what's true about that statement? No matter what, what's true? That they want more time with you.
Right.
What they're really saying is, I value my time with you. I would like more. That's what they're saying, right? They're accusing you of something. You don't spend enough time with me. You spend more time with my, the other, my brother and sister. You don't spend enough time with me, and it's accusation. What I find myself doing is, yes, I do. I'm trying my hardest. I've got a job, and I've also got your mother to spend time with, and I've got your brother and sister, and it's not just you. But it's like, well, hold on. When I defend, look what that does to the relationship. It causes the other person to not have the 4 things that they want more than anything in the world, which is to be seen, valued, loved, and understood. That's what you want, Megan. That's what I want. That's what your grandmother wants. That's what everyone in the world wants, is to be seen, valued, loved, and understood. But yet when we defend, we don't see, value, love, and understand the other person ever. And yet we spend a lot of our lives defending. So now when I look back, when I look at the times where my son, someone says to me, something sort of in an accusatorial tone, well, you're not spending enough time with me. And what, I'd be like, okay, just try to let the defense melt away. What's going on? What's being said here? What are they really communicating? They're communicating they want something, maybe it's they want some time with you. Now, you may not have the time to give them, but what if you look at them, instead of saying, yes, God damn it, I spend plenty of time with you and I've given you more than time than the other guys and they're not complaining. Instead of all that shit, if we can just say, wow, I guess I'm really honored you want more time with me. That's wonderful. I also would like more time with you. I tell you what, this week's tough because I've got this and this and this going on. but why don't we schedule next week to actually spend, get some alone time and maybe, go for a walk and spend it. Would that be nice? Yeah, that'd be really nice. Great. It's just that simple, right? But we're reactive and defensive, and that is terrible for really good, clean communication. And yet it's a state that we all come from, because we all have this egoic desire to be good, to not have done something that we think is bad. And yet I already told you, good and bad are useless terms, So anyway, that's another, I think, huge aspect of communication is
100%.
to witness when we're defending and just to try to stop it.
Yeah. And I think, that's something that we as humans, we can constantly be evolving with, is just practicing the art of having a healthy discussion. And like you said, observing and being the witness. But I think also a huge thing is just not letting our egos get in the way and not being emotionally attached to, like our inner child, when we're like, oh, this person hurt me and poor me and victim and all these modes that are actually unhealthy. And I think they lower our, kind of energy.
Well, those modes aren't unhealthy, right? It's like what's unhealthy is covering them up. So let me offer this. So when you feel the things you were just saying, like you're saying, God, I feel it. It's like, if you can actually communicate that you're feeling that, if you can actually tell the other person, wow, hold on a sec. Wow. I guess that really hurts my feelings that you are, my feelings I feel hurt. And I'm wondering why I'm feeling hurt. Well, I guess I feel hurt because I guess I feel that you don't approve of something I'm doing, and I'm trying really hard here. So how can I do a better job, to give you what you need right now from me? How can I do better? But if you actually go ahead and have the courage to find the vulnerability to say how something affects you, and I'm even saying, I'm saying this even in a leadership position, and you never do it to manipulate the other person. You never say, I'm hurt, stop it. The idea is just like, if you're hurting, you have to sort of take a moment to acknowledge that and go, why am I hurting? Gosh, I'm really sorry if I've disappointed you. I don't want to disappoint you. Seems like I've disappointed you because you want more time with me, and I haven't given you that time. Okay, what can we do? Wow. Right? So I think just communication should be a constant search for authenticity, for genuineness, for presence, for openness, for compassion, for truth, for love, for understanding. Right. And I think oftentimes what we see is there's some things that get in the way of that, predominantly, like you were mentioning, predominantly our ego. And it's fine that we have an ego. I mean, all of us have one. It's not that it's bad to have an ego. In fact, the concept that it's bad to have an ego is actually the ego talking. Wow. Because that's what the ego does. The ego talks in good and bad. The ego says, I'm better, you're worse, and compare. Anytime you're comparing yourself with someone, that's your ego. Anytime you're saying, I'm good, that's your ego. Anytime you're saying, I'm bad, that's your ego. Those concepts are egoic concepts. Those aren't real concepts. Things are what they are. We don't need to label them. And labeling does no good, doesn't change them. It just distracts us from understanding the truth of what's going on. Wow. And so I think if there's a couple things we can do to make our communication dramatically better. And one is, like I said, be present. Number two, when we feel ourselves drifting off and being distracted, acknowledge it and notice it, and sometimes even say it. Yeah. Megan, you just asked me a question, but Megan, to be honest with you, I was drifting off for a second. I'm sorry. It happens, sometimes. Right. Can you say it again? Like that. I mean, it's just like acknowledge you drifted off. Hey, you drifted off. And when you do that, people go, oh shit, he's telling me he drifted off. Guess what that gives the other person permission to do? Yeah. It gives them permission to say, yeah, I screwed up. I drifted off too. What did you say? And then all of a sudden it's genuine,
That's so true. And I think a lot of people are afraid to acknowledge, hey, my mind is elsewhere right now. I think that's a fear because it shows I'm unprofessional. I'm not paying attention. I think a lot of people, then scramble and just try, but that's so just being truthful. That's my.
Yeah. It's never professional to be untruthful.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fair statement, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. Well, it can't ever be a helpful thing to a conversation to be untruthful. Mm-hmm. And if it is a helpful thing to a conversation to be untruthful, what the hell is that conversation really about? Mm-hmm. It's not worth it.
Wow. I mean, all of these things are so profound. And is there a person, learning all of this, Monty, did you learn it from one particular person? Was this the way that you were raised, or just with your experience with Chipotle and your other business endeavors, is this just over time you learned these tricks and tools and just communication styles?
Well, certainly I've learned more and more and more throughout the years, but I would say that I've learned most of this through just communicating with every single person I see in life. And one of the things that I think has really helped me is that I have never thought it to be a more important conversation if I'm having it with the president of the United States than I do if I'm having it with a homeless person. Okay. So I have something in my brain. I don't know whether it's just wiring or I don't know. There's something in my brain that I think makes me a bit different, which is that I do not see a homeless person as in any respect less valuable, less interesting, or even less capable of teaching me than I see someone who's very, very prestigious or the president or someone who's an executive. So if two people approach me at the same time and, the president of the United States and a homeless person and say, hey, can you give me a hand? I'm going to look both ways and go, gee, where's the need greatest? Right. I'm not going to think shit. I'm going to help the president. I'll get to the homeless person later. So I find that I have learned more from literally homeless people, as I even talk about it in my book, than I've learned from sort of most other people, because, and I've also learned a tremendous amount from people whose English isn't very good, because the less good your English is, the more you can't bullshit. Go try to bullshit in a language you're not very good at. It's difficult. People tend to be very, very straight when they only know a few words. They tend to be very, very crisp with their communication. Hey, are you doing well today or not? Well, they don't know a bunch of nuance to try to bullshit their way through. So they'll say, I'm having a hard day, or it's a lousy day. But, and so when I was a kid and I worked at Dairy Queen, and I talk about this in the book, there was a mental health center right nearby. And a lot of homeless people came in who were, I guess society would say down on their luck. Okay. But to me, I didn't see that they were down on their luck. I just saw that they were maybe not dressed well, maybe hadn't showered in a long time. Maybe they were dirty. Maybe they weren't clean shaven. Maybe they were, their clothes had holes in them. Maybe their posture was defeated, sort of like looking down, and didn't look very strong. So I started sitting down with them every single day. And it became, I used every break every day to sit down with these homeless people and get to know them. And what I noticed was when I just sat down, because the first time I sat down was actually, I mentioned in the book, a guy named Will, and I sat down and I said, hey, I noticed you come in here a lot. Do you mind if I sit down and have lunch with you? And he looked at me, he said, and you could see in his eyes, he was like, holy, he was like, sure. But right away, just by me asking to sit with him, just by that one act, it changed his posture. His eyes opened wide. He sat up straight. He felt seen for a moment. He felt valued because I wanted to have lunch with him. And when he felt seen and valued, he started to open to the notion of being understood. And so I sat and I got to know him. Asked him, well, I see you come in here a lot and you always just get a coffee. You seem to put like 12 creams in the coffee and a lot of sugar. Yeah. Wouldn't it be better if you got something better to eat? Like, can I get you a burger or something, or something that's more, maybe got some nutrition in it? And so I started, because I got free food for my meals. So I started sharing a bit of my lunch with him, and he'd eat it, pretty quickly. And I would say, gosh, and he would say, well, I'm in the mental health thing over there and I'm homeless. And, oh, wow, how did you come to be homeless? Like, no one asks a homeless person, how'd you come to be homeless? Well, what could be more interesting? I was a young kid who had two parents and a good home, and I had every meal looked after, and I wasn't afraid of starving. And I'm here with a man who can tell me how one human being can come to be homeless, how they can come to be lonely, how they can come to have emotional pain, how they can come to have mental illness, perhaps. How can that happen? How does that happen? What in the world could be more interesting than that? So I was riveted. I was fascinated. I was so curious. So I asked him and a lot of the other people I sat with every single question that I could come up with. And I came up with a lot. And it took hours and hours and hours, weeks and weeks and weeks. And I got to know them. But as I got to know them, they would come in with a greater posture, a greater sense of pride, because now they felt seen, valued, loved, and understood. Because when I came to understand them, of course, I started to have compassion for them. I started to understand them, and in compassion and understanding, there's something that always happens. Whenever you have real compassion for someone and understanding, which is kind of the same thing, okay? Because when you really understand someone and you take the time to understand them, compassion arises. Okay, that just happens. You start to feel like, oh wow, I'm sorry. That sounds difficult. Well, it must have been difficult when you lost your home. It must have been difficult when the bank repossessed the home. It must be difficult when your wife left you. It must be difficult when, you had these tragedies occur that set your life on a difficult trajectory. Wow. And when you start to feel all that compassion, well, love arises always, not sometimes. When you really have compassion for someone, love is there. And that love is the desire to see that person at their best, the desire to help them grow, the desire to give them something of yourself so that they can become a better version of themselves, so they can start to feel a greater sense of pride and dignity, so they can feel a greater sense of capability of taking care of themselves, so they can start to be less confused about their future, what have you. But just in sitting down and seeing them, valuing them, loving and understanding them, they transformed. And they'd start to come into Dairy Queen and start bragging to me about how, hey, you know what? I didn't get a coffee today. I got a burger. And hey, and now I'm starting to quit smoking cigarettes, because I would always ask them, why are you smoking cigarettes all the time? Because they always say, well, I'm not getting food because I don't have much money, but you have cigarettes. Like, why would you buy cigarettes instead of something to eat? And they'd be like, well, I'm addicted. Oh, okay. I mean, okay, I get it. People are addicted to cigarettes. Have you ever thought about trying to quit? Because there's ways to do that. I don't know. It's like the only thing that gives me comfort. Oh, okay. Wow. It's the only thing that gives you comfort. Comfort from what? Like, what's going on? Oh, well, I'm hurting, like this. And all of a sudden you start talking, you understand why they'd be uncomfortable. What they've been through is extraordinary. They had been through stuff that I had never been through. And so I would say, where did I learn what I know? I learned it from homeless people. I learned it from people who have pain. I learned it from people who have needs. I learned it from people who have desires. And guess who that is? It's all of us.
Right.
That's all of us. So every single human being is a vast treasure trove of information from which all of us can learn an incredible amount, because we're so different in our experiences and so identical in our desires. So.
Wow. That's amazing, Monty. And I think that is very well said. And I had my own experience last week. In honor of Easter, some friends and we decided to make a little vlog, and we made some gift baskets and passed them out to homeless people here in Nashville, around the city. And I will say, I have learned so much just that day where we drove around and passed out Easter baskets with goodies and self-care and razor, shaving cream, hygiene products, everything,
nice.
Healthy snacks too. I will say, Monty, I learned so much because truly just passing them out, looking them in the eyes and smiling and asking them their name and saying, you look amazing, and the complimenting, a lot of them started crying and said, no one ever really acknowledges us. No one ever really looks us in the eyes. And it really changes someone's self-esteem when you see them. And, I think a really powerful thing is remembering that we have no idea how other people are feeling and what they could be going through personally that they're not sharing with us. So, I think we as humans can often, we start our day feeling one way, and then slowly we get cut off in traffic, or someone does this, and we just all of a sudden find ourselves in such a pile of different emotions, and we kind of forget where point A started that day. But it's so powerful, because when we come from a place of love and not judging and just being kind to other people and focusing on how we're showing up, I think it changes the whole game. And then, yeah.
And you said a really important word there, which is judging. Okay. So judgment, right, is always offensive. It's because, if you're judging someone, even if you're it's just sort of an offensive thing. And if you ask a question with judgment, it will be perceived as offensive. Mm-hmm. If you look at a homeless person and you think, wow, they are a loser, and you say to them, and so if you're thinking that they are a loser because they're not, accomplishing things that society deems important, and then from that place of judgment, ask a question, almost any question will be offensive. Mm-hmm. Almost any question. However, if you're not judging them at all, but simply seeing them and wanting to understand them without judgment, mm-hmm. almost any question you ask will not be offensive. So, when I ask a woman who's 79 years old, what's it like to have Parkinson's, from a place of childlike curiosity, because I just don't know. And when my goal is to understand her, inevitably, that is a gift to her to offer, my love and desire to understand her. Be great. And it's a gift to me that she's willing to teach me about her condition. So right away, you're giving each other a gift, right? It is always a gift to someone else to give them your attention, your curiosity, your love, your compassion, and your desire to understand them, right? Because that acknowledges them and causes them to feel what? Well, seen, valued, loved, and understood. The 4 things everyone in the world wants, And so anything you can do that causes someone to feel seen, valued, loved, and understood, even if that's digging into something that they really didn't want to talk about that day, it's always an acknowledgement that you value them. Now, so I'm not saying some people won't close up and say, oh, I don't want to go there. I can't talk about that. That's too painful. But when they say that's too painful, I don't want to go into it, you can sort of calmly and kindly acknowledge, okay, I understand. If ever you want to talk about it, I'm here. So I'm not saying you always dig, push too hard, but when you see that someone is willing to let you develop a deeper relationship and understanding of them, then it's never offensive to do so. It's in fact the opposite. What is the opposite of offensive? It's affirming.
Wow. Yeah, really good stuff. I would also love to know, Monty, so reading your book, I came across a section where you talked about your view on a work-life balance, and I thought your perspective was very interesting. Do you want to share more about that? Because I found it very, very fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, just the whole idea of work-life balance to me is completely absurd. I mean, what the hell does it mean? What does it mean?
I know, it's like to me, I just read that and I agree so much, because I think in life, people really think, oh, once I'm married, once it's Friday, once it's summertime, I will, it's the finish line. I've learned my lesson and I'm done. But it's work-life balance.
Well, I mean, it's funny, work-life balance. Okay. So I find something interesting about life, and that is assumptions. I find that almost all of the general assumptions that everyone goes by in this world are wrong. They're almost all wrong. Okay. The idea that work and life are even different, to me, is a completely faulty assumption. So let's go back, I don't know, 100,000 years. What were people like, insofar as they look, maybe they were hairier and whatever people looked like 100,000 years ago. But what were people doing for work-life balance 100,000 years ago? I mean, do you think that they said, I'm working now, while they went out to try to pick something to eat? Do you think they then said, oh, this is the non-work part where I'm now doing the life part, when they sat and slept? I mean, it's absurd. Our life is this unfolding thing of, having to survive, having to try to find comfort, having to try to find shelter, having to try to find love and understanding, seeking things that feel good to us, trying to avoid things that harm us. It's just life. And part of life is work. Work isn't the thing you do when you do the shitty part of life. Work isn't the bad part. It can be. If you hate your job, then okay, I can understand why you'd say, I want some work-life balance because I hate my job. But I would say, if you hate your job, well, gee, I mean, a big part of that's probably your attitude. Okay, I've had a lot of jobs that people would consider lousy jobs. I have been a janitor. I've been a dishwasher. I've been a busboy. And then I graduated to the bigger jobs of being a waiter, being a car mechanic, being a car part salesman. None of these jobs were jobs, particularly a janitor, that people are like, dude, you're a janitor? Cool. How can I get some of that? But yet I loved these jobs. They were interesting. I learned a ton as a janitor, because it was a senior citizen center. And guess what I got to do? Ask tons of questions of people older and wiser than me and learn from them. So this idea that work is bad and that therefore we must balance it with life, I just don't get it. The times in my life where I've been, most excited and invigorated have been times where all I wanted to do was, for instance, practice law. Or all I wanted to do was try to help Chipotle succeed. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I want to do with my day. Some people want to play video games all day. I wanted to make Chipotle better all day. So did that mean I was out of balance? That I wanted to make Chipotle better all day long? Did that mean I was out of balance? That I wanted to work on my legal cases and help my clients because that was really fun for me, really exciting. And yes, it was also my job. Well, no, those were the times that were most exciting, when I was working the hardest. So I would say my work-life balance, when I was working those times, if I was working 14 or 16 hours a day, I'd say I was in perfect work-life balance, because I was working extraordinarily hard and loving it, and then took time to eat and sleep between, And there's other times where I mean, so see, I told you I can talk forever about anything. So let me sort of boil it down on the work-life balance thing. If you try to give people this concept of work-life balance, the problem is work-life balance is different for everybody. Some people want to work all the time. And when you talk to them about work-life balance, what they really want you to do is shut up and let them get back to work. Okay. Other people don't want to work at all. And so if you try to give them the balance that they want, what they want is to never work. So that won't work anyway. You can't give people work-life balance because there's no such thing. And if there were such thing, you can't give it to them because it wouldn't work, because some people don't want to work at all. Well, that's not going to be very good. If they're working for you and they don't want to work at all, that won't fly. So it's a stupid concept. And the reason people bring it up is because they don't understand that what's really going on is a lack of empowerment. If you have someone who wants work-life balance, it's because they don't feel empowered in their job. They're not enjoying their job. They don't want to do their job. And really what they should do is start working towards doing something that they're enthusiastic about, that they're passionate about, that they can bring that they can put their whole effort into, and their love into, and their enthusiasm into. So if there's something that they love doing outside of work that makes them feel more balanced, do that instead, full time, but do it in a way that helps someone else, such that it's valuable, such that perhaps they get paid for it.
Wow. Yeah, I'm like, I have so many conversations with my friends about this, and we agree the work-life balance, number one, when you are an entrepreneur or you're in this world, like for me, my life, it changes every single day. I can't predict what I'm going to have going on tomorrow. It changes. Sometimes I'm editing videos. Sometimes I'm, speaking. Sometimes I'm traveling. And I think it's just being flexible and adapting to where you are today and how you can be your best self today. And I think that's also another thing that pandemic has taught all of us is to adjust again. And then once you think you're there, adjust even more, be flexible, and just bring your A game wherever you are, and getting comfortable with just the growth and the changes that happen when you do follow your passions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, it's funny because a lot of people ask questions about that work-life balance thing. And I think it's just absolutely absurd, like so blatantly absurd, and it's kind of as absurd as when people say, God, the morale is bad at work. We've got to do something to get morale up. Get morale up. If morale is low, it's because people aren't empowered. And if you want to increase empowerment, well, I discuss in great depth how to do that in my book. It's something you can do. You just do it. You don't sit there and talk about morale and buy donuts and put up posters saying, smile today. Right. It's ridiculous. People should smile from the inside, they shouldn't have some poster telling them to smile. It's absurd,
Wow, that's really true. Okay, my last question for you, Monty, before we go into rapid fire round, which is a bunch of random fun questions, my question for you. So, as you may know, it is my mission in life to change the public school system and to incorporate mandatory classes about mental health, self-care, simple things like how to
nutrition.
Nutrition, how to pay taxes, how to tie a tie, how to write a check, nutrition, how to work-life balance, and the stigma that comes with that. I want to know, Monty Moran, what is one class you wish you had in your high school growing up, or middle school or college?
Well, okay. As a really young person, God, there's just so many going through my mind. I think it's funny. I just think all the assumptions of modern society, most of the assumptions of modern society are wrong. And so I think there should be so I don't have a name for the class, but there should be a class which challenges all of society's assumptions. I think there should be a class that teaches kids it's not better to be rich than not to be rich. That's not better. It's not better to be, it's not better to be fast than slow. It's not, but there's no such thing as better or worse. There's no such thing as good and bad. That it's that's a class that sort of encourages the uniqueness of each person, and also teaches them that there is no future. There's just today. And it's like we should do the best we can with today to make I guess what I'm getting into is sort of this. I'm thinking of this book by Eckhart Tolle called The Power of Now.
Oh, such a good book.
Oh, it's great. It's like every kid should get to read that book as a kid. And also there should be a class that teaches people about all of society's assumptions. Think about the concept of improving land, right? That land is, if you look out at something like Yellowstone National Park, some beautiful place with geysers and animals roaming, and that land, what that land is? That land is unimproved.
Mm-hmm.
Unimproved. Jesus Christ, you can't make it any nicer.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's unimproved. Okay, now if you go look at New York City with parking lots everywhere and jackhammers and a bunch of people stomp on firm pavement, that is completely improved, developed land. Think about the words.
Right.
It's improved when it's got a parking lot. It's unimproved when it's got elk on it.
Yeah.
That's stupid. Okay. Also, this notion that, kids are getting school lunches, which are filled with food that's utterly, it tastes terrible. It's not made with respect. There's no discussion about where the food came from. And they're eating it and they're in school. And yet the school, the place that's supposed to teach them values, is giving them food that has no value, that has no nutritional value, that hasn't taken care of the animals from which it comes, that hasn't taken care of the produce from which it comes, that hasn't had any effort to engage in responsible environmental stewardship. It's absurd. So when I think of classes, it's sort of like, wow, run a school in a way that actually teaches respect for the world, respect for each other, respect for the environment, just respect, so I don't know what you call that class, but there needs to be a class that teaches people what's really going on in the world and how you respect each other in the world, because we are not taught to respect each other. We're taught to try to get ahead, use other people to make more money. And then once we make more money, to use that to make still more money so that we can buy huge ships and yachts and look important and buy Rolexes. And then we'll have a pretty spouse. Ridiculous. Another thing that's maybe the most important lesson that people need to learn in the world as young people is the value of struggle. Struggle is good. It is not bad. Struggle makes you stronger, smarter, better. It makes you more aware of what's really going on. It makes you aware of your own limitations and your own capabilities. A greater depth of character gives you wisdom. It helps you value other people. Struggle is good, and I'm using the word good here. Struggle is a wonderful, positive thing that makes you stronger. And yet all of us are basically taught in life how to avoid struggle, And if some kid is struggling, let's say he's on a soccer team and there's 10 kids on the soccer team and he is the worst player on the team. What do we do these days? We lie. We don't tell him he's the worst player on the team. We give him a trophy. We say, you're wonderful. You're great. No, you're great.
Right.
What's wrong with saying, hey, you're not very good at soccer, but you know what? With continued effort and continued struggle, you can get better.
Right.
And to actually not lie to people, right? Mm-hmm. Struggle is good. When I did this connected docuseries and went around the country and talked to people, it turned out that, and all of us have had struggle, right? Everyone in the world has had struggle. The people in my docuseries were no exception. But the ones who have come from a life of the most struggle tend to be, in my opinion, often the most, they tend to have the most wisdom. They tend to have the most, the richest lives. Mm-hmm. Okay, not in terms of dollars and cents. That's not where real riches come. Real riches come in understanding and getting closer to the truth and learning that you can depend on, that sometimes you need other people and you can learn to depend on them. And sometimes you can learn to give of your effort to other people who need you. Struggle brings out the best in people, not the worst.
Right. Yeah, that is something I think in the journey of being an entrepreneur, and just, I've had those moments, and I think a lot of people talk about it. A lot of, whatever success means to you, a lot of very wealthy, famous. I mean, Tony Robbins himself, I just think it's very powerful when people are open about, they were once at that place where some people call it rock bottom, and some people have a negative connotation where, financially they were in a very tough, very tight situation. But you are right, because I think those moments, they give you this mindset, either an inner drive or bravery, or how to really budget, and you just learn these tools that will make you successful in the long run, because what it is like to make it work with whatever you have and to be grateful, but to also just think in that kind of, I call it a hustler mindset, where you just, I don't know, like survival, like
But what really, but Megan, when you talk about a hustler mindset implies, it's like it implies the struggle, climb the corporate ladder, get there. But really a hustler, what I would say, when you say a hustler mindset, what I would say, that mindset really, the healthy mindset that will help anyone to grow into becoming the best version of themselves, the most capable version of themselves. That mindset is just a healthy one. Okay. A healthy one where they understand that they have a lot to give other people, that when they give a lot to other people benefit, that when you help other people benefit, that is the single greatest thing you can do to enrich yourself. The biggest thing I learned, for instance, building the culture in my law firm, was when I went from being a doer who felt like I had to work harder and harder and harder and harder and harder to do it myself, to becoming a leader where I thought, wait a minute, a much higher calling than getting better at something ourselves is to start to understand that helping others be the best version of themselves is much more powerful and more fulfilling to us. And the more we can give value to other people in this life, the more we can help them, okay, and put our focus on helping them, helping heal them, helping them through, times that they're having a difficult time, the more we will benefit. And if you look at sort of the rock bottom concept, I mean, Tony Robbins was at a state of his life where he was utterly depressed. He was incredibly obese. He was very unhealthy, and he was miserable. Okay, he felt miserable. And that misery was based on, a constant rejection of himself. He was rejecting himself. The misery wasn't externally imposed. He was rejecting himself. And then somehow he was able to understand, wait a minute, there's some value in here, and he learned to have some compassion for himself. And in there, he started to develop the right kind of mindset from which he had the energy to help others. And then what has he done since? Focused on others. He's focused on helping others. And through focusing on helping others, yes, he's become a zillionaire. Yes, he's found fulfillment. Eckhart Tolle, the guy who wrote The Power of Now I was just talking about, he wanted to kill himself. And he spent a night in bed just, thinking, I want to kill myself, I want to kill myself, I want to kill myself. And then he had this epiphany. He realized, wait a minute, I want to kill myself. Is that two things? Who is the I that wants to kill myself? So he saw that there's this bifurcation in his mind of who he was, right? He's got the I want to kill myself. Well, he realized that in that thing that there was an aggressor trying to kill the other part. But he's like, wait a minute, who is it that wants to kill whom here? It's all in himself. And then, of course, he realized that was sort of the ego, right? That was his built personality. That was his ego. That was the thing that was one side. And then there was the sort of part of himself that couldn't be killed, right? The essential nature. And then he started to understand. And anyway, so he laid in bed and he was kind of dozing off. And then what he tried to do is he tried to let part of himself die, like just let it die. And he tried to sort of let it die. And he dozed off in this state of allowing himself to fall into what, was going to be the death of his ego. And the next day he woke up and all of a sudden he noticed the birds were chirping. And he noticed that his room that he'd been in for years was beautiful. And he noticed things and everything looked more three-dimensional. And he had this beautiful experience that didn't go away, sort of ever. I mean, he had times where it was more and less vivid, but it changed his state forever because he sort of understood that this thing that he was trying to kill, that he didn't need to have this war with himself. He could just allow himself to be now. We spend all our time focused on the future. The future doesn't exist, just like work-life balance. It's an absurd concept. It doesn't exist. We don't need to make it come. Something will come, and when it comes, it will be the present. There's no future. If you rewind my life, okay, I was just talking to my oldest son about this the other day because he's at a stage wondering what to do with his future. What do I do with my future? I said, you don't do anything with your future. You do something well now. Now, if you look back at my life, you can say in hindsight, wow, Monty got a lot of little jobs that were kind of, minimum wage jobs from which he learned important lessons, which were the foundation of a future career that was very successful, where he made money and, prestige and got to lead a lot of people. Okay. That's revisionist history. If you rewind 25 years, I was looking, going, God, what am I going to do? Everyone else is doing smart things where they're going to get ahead. What do I do? But luckily, I didn't focus on that. I just thought, I'll just do what I'm doing now and try to do it really well. I'll just do what I'm doing now and try to do it really well. I'll just try to do what I'm doing now and do it really well. I'll try to learn from people around me. I'll ask them questions. I'll continue being curious and I'll see what I can learn about this world. And you just put one step in front of the other. And the path, if you put one step in front of the other, and you do it with love and attention, and you do it with care and try to, with the lack of judgment, and you do it with a lack of defense, and you just put one step in front of the other, the path is positive because there is no negative. If you're walking down a path and you step on a nice soft bit, let's say you're walking through a picture like a desert island with like thick bushes on both sides of you, but sort of beach sand beneath your feet. You don't know where it's going, but you're walking down it because the sand feels nice on your feet. And every now and then you step on a thorn. Does that mean you stop? No, you're like, ouch, that hurt. Does that mean that was a bad step? No, it was a step that advanced you down the path. Then you step on another thing, there's a rock, it's sharp, it hurts your foot. Was that step a mistake? No. Was it something that you need to regret? No. Did it hurt? Yes. Was that pain something that was bad? No, it was pain. Pain's not bad, pain's pain. Okay, so you keep walking. And the next steps, maybe some of them are comfortable, some of them are uncomfortable, some are hot on your feet, some are cold on your feet. But you walk. And when you go down the path, things happen and you experience life. And since the fundamental nature of the universe is good and love and God and truth, if you just walk forward with a fundamental belief that, you know, that when you allow the truth to exist, it is good. It is, and then your life unfolds, and it unfolds beautifully. And it doesn't mean that everyone will be like everyone else or something. You know, it doesn't mean that it's better to be, you know, the richest guy in the world. Being the richest guy in the world comes with enormous responsibility, and the whole world's looking at you and wondering what you're going to do with your money, and they're going to judge you whether you give it to the right places or whether you don't give it away enough, and whether you're greedy, and you get judged. It's hard to be the richest person in the world, I would imagine. Yes. Okay. It's also hard to be the poorest person in the world, but it's also hard to be right in the middle. It's hard. Life's hard. Who gives a shit that it's hard? And why do I say who gives a shit that it's hard? Because struggle is good. It is not bad. It should not be avoided. It should be embraced. Yeah. It's the thing from which we grow, and growth is wonderful.
That's wow. Yeah, that's amazing. So, Monty Moran.
Lightning round?
Yes. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So these are just very fun, quick, off the top of your head questions. So my first question for you, Monty, is what is your favorite type of junk food?
Lucky Charms.
Amazing. I love that. That's such a classic. And my next question for you, what is the most embarrassing thing that has ever happened to you?
Well, I was up on stage in elementary school, and I was in this play, and I had white tennis shorts on. Back then, tennis shorts were white and very short. I had these white tennis shorts on and a t-shirt. And in the play I was supposed to be pretending to swing on a trapeze, you know, like I'm supposed to be, there's no trapeze, but I'm pretending, so I'm running forward, running backwards. And then I wet my pants, and pee went running down my legs in front of the entire school and all the parents.
Oh my God.
And then what's worse is all the adults, like then I started crying. I don't know how old I was. I was young. I was only about 25. No, I'm teasing, I wasn't little. But anyway, no. No, but I was a young kid, and the pee's running down my legs. And then all the teachers and do-gooders come in to go, oh, it's okay. Well, it was totally not okay, right? I was like totally embarrassed. And then they're all trying to like help me and stuff. And all I just wanted to do is like go home and get under my bed and like never come out. Oh. So, you know, if you can talk about struggle, if you can survive that. Yeah. I mean, it sucked. You know, it was awful. It was so bad.
And the moment, I love how you started that conversation with when I was on stage. That's like, boom.
Yeah. Yeah.
The scene.
It's a wonder I've ever gotten on stages since. I do hope, look, I don't believe in good and bad, but I do hope I don't wet myself on stage again. That was a bit much.
Yeah, that would be so scary.
I don't need to repeat it.
I love that. So my next question for you, Monty, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received, and who did you receive it from?
Live in the present, Eckhart Tolle.
I love that. It's so simple, and I love Eckhart as well. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And okay, my last.
I shouldn't say I first received that. I didn't first receive it from him. I've been receiving that lesson from a lot of sources my whole life, but he's the one I think who puts it in such a wonderful, digestible format where it, yeah, so I'll give him the credit for it. But yes, I've heard that from many places. It's not a new concept.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then my last rapid fire question for you, Monty, is what is one thing on your bucket list that you've been dying to check off that you want to do, whether it's skydiving, bungee jumping, traveling to a foreign country, go cage diving with sharks? What is one thing?
I want to go to Missoula, which is a place in off the great big island of Papua New Guinea, to go skin diving and snorkeling, because apparently it's the one place in the world where the undersea life and coral reefs and everything are actually gaining in biodiversity, whereas almost everywhere else they're all destroyed. So I used to love to skin dive a lot. Now it's depressing because all the ocean life is almost all gone, and almost all the coral reefs are dead, and all the sharks are gone. And in that place, apparently it's still teeming with life. So I'm going to go down there.
That's amazing. That sounds like a wonderful place.
Yeah, I think it is.
That's amazing. Well, Monty, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Reaching New Heights. This has been
Thank you, Megan.
An absolute honor. And everyone watching, go get your copy of Love is Free, Guac is Extra. And I want to say, Monty, this title, Guac is Extra, is amazing. As a lifelong fan of Chipotle, it's just so incredible. And I've loved chatting with you today. You are so full of wisdom. And I just think this episode is going to be so impactful for people of all ages. But I really think that people in my Gen Z millennial generation, I think, and this is just me being honest about my generation, I think a lot of us can come across as entitled and think that, everything is an overnight success. And the people on Instagram who have 10 million followers, that's amazing too. But I think I just really admire your authenticity, and you're just honest about your journey, because I think, it's just, that's real life. And I think social media can often create this facade that, oh, you post one picture and then you're going to be a billionaire. But I love how honest you are about the whole entire journey.
Well, thank you very much, Megan. And thanks for your interest. And I'm glad you liked the book.
Yes. And one last question, Monty, for everyone watching, do you have any current projects or any new collaborations or things upcoming, speeches where people can catch you?
Well, I mean, right now I would just say I'm focused mostly on my my docuseries, Connected: A Search for Unity, and it's starting to air throughout the United States. It's been airing for a while in some places, but in most places I think it starts April 11th. But so that's been wonderful, and we're going to do another season. So we're starting to work on the next season, and so that's really exciting because I love going out and meeting people from all different walks of life and learning from them and continuing to learn from them. But also now through the docuseries, sharing that knowledge and the wisdom that they have with other people. It's really fun.
That's amazing. And I cannot wait. I definitely going to tune in, and that's so incredible. But thank you again, Monty, for today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Megan. Take care.
Thank you. You as well.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.